So we're going to go ahead and build our very first PhoneGap application, and it's going to be an iPhone application. I'm working on a Mac, so it allows me to go ahead and download all the tools that I need to be able to effectively build out a solution that will run inside the iPhone emulator. The first thing you want to do before you actually go ahead and install PhoneGap is you'll actually want to go ahead and open up the App Store on your Mac and download and install xcode, and make sure you have the latest elements to xcode. That is a fairly large installation, so it'll take a while. I generally encourage you to do it overnight. After you've done that, you want to go to the PhoneGap website. Now, PhoneGap will have a quick installation guide in the top right hand corner. You can select that and it'll take you to a screen which will actually give you the tools that you need to be able to go in and install the application. We're not actually going to use the command lines that they've got here. We're actually going to use some different command lines, but they're essentially the same thing. But what I did want to show you is that there's a link to Node.js. And here's the Node.js website. If this is the very first time that you're actually building an application that is to run on your Mac or on your PC, you want to go ahead and install Node onto your desktop and get that up and running. Later on, if you want to build Android applications, you'll also want to go and download the Android ADT solution that will actually put all of the tools that you need for Android development on your desktop as well. So let's go back to PhoneGap. And on the PhoneGap website, you'll see that everything is being written for command line. So you want to get really comfortable using Terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Terminal. And here is Terminal, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be, for the rest of this tutorial, using my Terminal window to run all the commands. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the directory for where I'm going to install all of my files. I've gone ahead and created a cheat sheet so that it makes it easier for me. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to the right directory. And this happens to be my desktop, so I'm going to change that to my desktop. And now I'm on my desktop. The very first install on the PhoneGap website is a command that installs from Node the PhoneGap application. There's also an alternative for the open source version of PhoneGap, which is called Cordova. And I actually prefer using Cordova because it is the latest and greatest bits. So I'm going to go in, copy the Cordova command line. I'm going to paste in the Cordova command line, and I'm going to run it. And the first thing it's going to ask me for is my password, which I will enter. And then you sit back, and what's going to happen now is that a lot of files are going to be downloaded from the Cordova website and registered with your desktop for this application. So here we go, it's downloading all the files. There aren't too many, so even if you have a relatively slow DSL connection like I do, it installs fairly quickly. And there we are, all installed. So the next thing is to go ahead and create a project. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the command Cordova create, and then the project name is going to be called My First App. Because we've got everything on our desktop, I'll be able to show you where all the files are being created. So let's go in. And that created our app. I can go ahead and open up my Finder, and I will go to my desktop. And here on the desktop is my first app, and in the first app are all of the files that you'd expect to see in a Cordova application, particularly the www folder, which has all of the files in it. So that's the first part of creating our application, is downloading all of the files for Cordova, then creating a project. The next is then associating the iOS platform with your project. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move actually into the folder of my first app. And now I'm in the folder, and I'm going to go ahead and add a platform, and the platform I'm going to add is iOS. And there we are. It's going to go ahead and create the project for iOS. And it went ahead and did that. one of the things you may want to do is look to see what other platforms you can create. And so the command ls will actually list all of the different platforms that are supported. And so we go ahead and you can see that you have Amazon, Fire OS, Android, BlackBerry 10, and Firefox OS. And one thing that's great with PhoneGap is that the team is constantly adding new operating systems as the operating systems become more relevant. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build the project for iOS, and that's going to go ahead and use the build command. And so I target the iOS application, it goes ahead and builds the app, and here we go, it's going to build everything, and it only takes a couple of moments. And good news, our build has been successful. That's great. So we've gone ahead and we've downloaded Cordova. We've built our first, created our first project with Cordova. We've targeted the first project to be an iOS project. We've built the project for iOS. Now we have to go ahead and see what it looks like. So the final command we're going to do is we're going to go into Cordova. We're going to ask it to open the emulator, and we're going to target the iOS emulator. So it goes ahead and rebuilds the project for us, and it will now open up the emulator. Here we go. The emulator is opening up behind the task window. And there we are. We have our first application that is an Apache Cordova application running in a iOS simulator. So we know it's a real application, it's not a fake application. We can now go ahead and we can actually build and package this application and submit it to Apple for the iTunes App Store. So that's just a quick overview of how to get up and running with Cordova on your desktop to build your very first iOS application. Just to review, we went through and we had to run a bunch of commands, and I'm going to bring up my cheat sheet. I'm going to put this out on the website. So these are the commands that I used to get up and running. And then, more importantly, this was the folder that was created for my first app. And I'm just going to change this so we can see what this looks like. The important part are the www folder, where you put in all of your HTML code. And then the platforms folder, which will then select which platform you will build for. Now, I will tell you that when I went through this whole setup of getting everything running, it was on a brand new machine and it was running Mavericks. And I did run into a bunch of issues. Some of those were fairly easy to resolve. Some I'm still actually in the process of resolving. That's why That's why I didn't do an Android version, because I wasn't able to get Android working. But I will be able to get that working fairly soon. I'm quite confident that it's actually just something to do with my settings. But I did go in and I had to run a bunch of different things within Xcode to make sure that everything was working correctly. One of the things I did have to do was go install Homebrew. And then after installing Homebrew, actually then run the install for the iOS simulator so that it would work for demonstrating the application. These were things that I was able to resolve very quickly by doing a quick Google search on the error messages that were thrown. The error messages are very well documented, and you'll find great support online from other people that are having the same kind of troubles and trying to resolve them. PhoneGap is used to create about 1 in 3 applications today, so there's literally hundreds of thousands of developers working in it, so any of the issues that come up can be resolved. Hopefully this will give you inspiration to build your first application. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below, and I will get back to you with any issues you have. Pass them on to me and we'll get them resolved. Thanks very much.